United faced off with RB Leipzig yesterday in what was a fairly impressive performance. We didn't really allow too many chances against us, we created plenty, we managed to win 2-0, ultimately very, very nice. However, a lot of people noted that we didn't particularly see one long-standing member of the Leeds United squad. I say long-standing, he's been here 3 years, so not the longest of times, but you know what I mean. And that specifically would be Joel Piroe. Now, Joel Piroe found himself sort of on the outskirts of the squad last season, and there's been a lot of sort of rumour around a potential exit for the player, and we've heard that there could be potential for a little bit of news in the morning around what is going to happen with Piru. So in this video I'm going to cover what exactly the discussion is around, what it could mean for Leeds United going into the foreseeable future, and ultimately what we might do in order to replace him, because it's a very, very complicated topic. But before I do so, I'm going to test something new here. If you could hype the video, I know there's a button that you press and it's somewhere down here somewhere, that'd be hugely appreciated, because I've never really sort of tested asking people to do that on a video, so I don't know what it actually does. So I thought I'd see. Thank you very much. Anyway, diving into it. The core of this report comes from Isaac Johnson, who is a typically fairly reliable reporter when it comes to Leeds United stuff, and he set it out in a few sort of steps around the Piru news. So firstly, he said that comments from Daniel Farke are due to come out tomorrow surrounding why Joel Piroe didn't play today, which is an interesting one, because there was also a little bit of conversation around, for example, Gabby Goodmanson, who didn't play, and conversation around the fact that, well, he might miss the start of the season. So clearly, Daniel Farke isn't opposed to having conversations around general bits of news surrounding the squad. However, he clearly had something interesting to say specifically on the topic of Joel Piroe, which had to be saved, which says that there is potential for some form of announcement or something. He did also specify that it wasn't injury related, so it's not a case of he's got a slightly janky calf or anything along those lines. But also it was indicated that it's potentially not the fact that a bid for him has been accepted, because he was on the bench, and we know that Leeds United, when it comes to having bids accepted for our players, don't tend to even risk any opportunity of a player getting an injury. If you look back to the recent friendlies, Lucas Perry played in like half of one of our pre-season friendlies over in the US, which is very, very, very little football, understandably, because Torino and various other clubs had a little bit of an interest in signing him, which makes sense. You keep your player sort of protected and fresh, which says that that could be potentially what's going on with Joel Piroe, but the complexity comes around the fact that apparently a bid hasn't been accepted, so I'm not entirely sure what direction to take that one, which is quite interesting, but it is becoming very, very clear that Piroe is not, in fact, in the plans for the season. When it comes to the sort of outskirtsy players, you're looking at Joel Piroe, who is expected to leave. It's just the format of the departure that's a question mark. Ramazani will be expected to leave. Again, it's a question of, will it be a loan, will it be permanent? Gelhardt is expected to leave, whether it's loan, whether it's permanent. Big sort of question marks. I think Piroe is one of those that's a little bit more solid in terms of what we can expect, because Piroe, out of that list of players, is on one of the higher wage packets. Specifically, he is earning £40,000 a week, which is not an insignificant chunk of cash. For a Premier League player, obviously that's sort of relatively on the lower end, which feels like an insane thing to say. But if you have a look at where he's more likely to end up, which is, if we're being realistic here, the Championship, he's sort of on an average wage down there, or at least an above average wage, a sort of high-end player kind of wage, which means that in the immediate term I think it's more likely that we'll be looking to loan him out to a team, because sides won't want to invest the big amount of money as well as wages on a very expensive player. I think it's more likely to be a case of loan, potentially we cover a little bit of his wages just to make sure that there is a chance that another club signs him, and then a mechanism which allows them to sign him permanently going forwards. Personally, I would like to see that be an obligation to buy, purely because our ability to convert loans into permanent deals tends to be relatively limited, but it feels like definitely something that we should be doing and can be doing, and I think realistically will be doing when it comes to the Joel Piroe conversation. I say wages are unlikely to be an issue. I think that's not necessarily the case with Willy Gnonto as like a little bit of a counterexample, purely because Gnonto is significantly younger and will be looking for a pay rise in the next deal that he gets. He's also on apparently around 40 grand a week, which will go up with his next move, presuming it will be a top flight move, which will be quite an interesting thing to see. Anyway, aside from that, one of the more confusing parts around what we're going to do with Joel Piroe is around his replacement, because there has been a lot of discussion around a number 9, there's been a lot of discussion around a number 10 or a more creative attacking player, and big sort of bits of curiosity around what the direction is going to be there. So there's been conversations around a Rooney Bargy, around Frankie Lino. There was conversation around Pavel Šoch as another example, which means that you kind of need to work out what Joel Piroe is before you work out how to replace Joel Piroe, because Joel Piroe's replacement is ideally going to play in the same role as him, and that's where there's a lot of confusion, because last season I would say that we more often than not saw Piroe in more of a sort of attacking midfield, number 10 kind of role, which you would assume is more of the Pavel Šoch kind of thing, which is fine, all well and good, because we know that he can do that. But the seasons before that, in the Championship, Piroe was an incredible goal scorer, without a doubt, playing almost entirely as a number 9, but he wasn't sort of an out-and-out 9 in those seasons. He was a sort of box-crashing number 9, which isn't something you expect to hear most of the time. The 9 normally leads the line. In my opinion, you got the best out of Joel Piroe when he wasn't leading the line, when he was sort of that more working behind kind of player where he would just sort of arrive at the last minute, which makes replacing him incredibly tough. Will it be a case of a striker because you want someone to challenge DCL, or will it be a case of that creator instead? But Piroe wasn't really a creator in the first place. Ultimately, I think after what are some very, very, very big signings, let's be honest here, Trafford was an expensive move, Muharamovic was an expensive move. I don't think we're going to see any other moves to that same sort of scale in this window. I think we'll see sort of 10 to 20 million pound moves, of course. But it's going to be a question of where we choose to allocate those resources. And allocating them into a Piroe replacement will be one of the more important things that we do at the moment, and hopefully we do it well, because if we don't, things are going to be a little bit spooky, but I imagine we'll be sort of okay. I would love to see someone like a Pavel Šoch, but just because he can both create chances and score the goals, he maybe does a little bit of both of those jobs. But when you think about it, a direct Piroe replacement isn't super essential anyway, because we barely played Piroe last season. I've just noticed that the end of this video got a little bit more rambly than I intended for this video to get, but that's sort of fine. Overall, the Leipzig match was a pretty damn good game for us. We proved that we don't necessarily need a Joel Piroe. We did very, very well in it, but hopefully we are able to continue to do quite well going forward and get the results that we need when they actually count. Although I would say Man United counts, just for the matter of pride. But yeah, anyway, I'm going to leave that there. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, pop a like on the video. As earlier, pop a hype on it as well, because I want to see what happens. It's very, very curious. Subscribe if you fancy as well. Hope you all enjoyed. I'm going to leave that there, and I will see you all later. Toodaloo.